Exactly 1 year to the day of their Black Wednesday cuts where WWE released dozens of talents and producers and other employees. It was time for more post-WrestleMania cuts on Black Thursday this week, as the company released a total of 10 talents for what many of them were told were for budgetary reasons. At a time when the company is making more money than ever before, they want to increase their profit margin even more. They also declared their quarterly dividend later that same day for shareholders, which was, it's a formality, but was very unfortunate timing. It's the nice way of putting it. Topping the list of names let go, and the most shocking name of all, was Samoa Joe, who was last seen at WrestleMania last weekend dressed in a poncho calling matches out in the rain. Even though he hasn't wrestled a match in over a year, to say that this was unexpected would be the understatement of the century. The other names included Mickie James, Chelsea Green, Peyton Royce, Billie Kay, Mojo Rawley, Bo Dallas, Wesley Blake, Kalisto, and Tucker, formerly of Heavy Machinery. I'd like to drop some heavy machinery on the head of whoever thought it was necessary to break up Otis and Tucker. And judging from his tweets, it sounds like he feels the same way. According to Fightful, the newly reinstalled head of talent relations, John Laurinaitis, got to play Hatchet Man again and deliver the bad news to everybody. He was citing budget cuts as the reason. That black goo that they use for Alexa Bliss, that don't come cheap. Neither do the magic CGI birds that fly out of Matt Riddle's flip-flops. Now, all of them have 90-day non-compete, so they will not be free to sign anywhere until July 15th, because they're going to get paid through July 14th, so I assume the 15th is the first official free day they would have. Fightful noted that several of the release names had inquired with management days or weeks earlier about whether or not they were on the chopping block. I guess they were worried. Maybe they knew, right? It's this time of year, spring cleaning cuts. They want to make sure their job is safe. Should I be concerned? And according to Fightful, many of them were told, no, you're not in jeopardy. Just, don't worry about it. Only to get the call that they were released. And if that's true, of course, it is appalling. It's an appalling thing to lie to someone like that when they're worried about their job. But I don't get the sense they really care. It's numbers. It's almost like the names don't even matter. When you get into this big corporate setting like that, you're just a number. Now, I hate to see anyone lose their job unless they deserve it. If they deserve it, then fuck them. But I hate to see anyone lose their job. It's a shitty situation, especially now. Even though it seems like we're in a better spot now than we were a year ago, when the world was upside down and a lot of people were losing their jobs. It's just a shitty situation to be in. But the reality is, this is the company cutting what they feel is the dead weight from its roster to make their financials look sexier, because they're getting ready to release their Q1 earnings this Thursday. And in many, not all, but many cases, these were people the company simply was not using. They were sitting around, they weren't doing much of anything. And you could argue that for a lot of these people, this will end up being a positive thing, because a lot of them are going to go work other places. Their career is not over. Their life is not over. And hopefully, the majority of them will end up better off, or they'll be happier, not sitting around in the back doing nothing. But you look up and down this list, and this was the list of names in many cases that were simply not being utilized by the company. So let's run through these names. Let's talk about them one by one. And we're going to start with the one. We're going to start with Samoa Joe. This is the most appalling of the bunch. Joe has not wrestled a match since February 10th of last year. It was an 8-man tag on Raw. It was Joe, Kevin Owens, and the Viking Raiders losing to Seth Rollins, Murphy, and AOP. Joe took the losing fall in that match. This was after Joe had been out for several months with a broken thumb. He came back, and he got concussed in a tag team title match on Raw. Middle of the match, in fact. They had to take him out of the match. He came back. He had a couple of matches on TV, and then he suffered another concussion during a commercial shoot, of all things. He was taking a power bomb through a table from the Authors of Pain, a spot that they kept in the commercial, by the way, which you can still find online. It was that whole Must Be Monday ad that they did for Raw at the time. And that concussion was said to be a very bad one. And also it came so soon after the most recent one. So back-to-back concussions. The second one was a nasty one. A few weeks later, he was suspended for 30 days for violating the company's wellness policy. And he has not wrestled since. They added him to the Raw announce team last year. He did well. He was pretty good at it. I know, shocking. Samoa Joe can talk. But, cutting a promo and doing commentary are two totally different things. You never really know until you thrust someone into that role how well they're going to do. And, he took what they gave them, or he took what he was given, and I thought he made the most of it. I thought he was pretty good in the role. Now, the belief is that he had recently indicated that he wanted to return to the ring. He was trying to make a comeback, and the company had not yet cleared him to do so. Now, unless we come to find out that he requested his release so that he can go work somewhere else, this makes no sense. And this is truly one of the dumber decisions that WWE has ever made. And that is knowing the man's injury history. I'm well aware of his injury history. He was definitely prone to injury, later in his career. He's not getting any younger. He's got a lot of mileage on that body. But he can talk. There's an authenticity, there's an authority in his promos that, when he is cleared, I'm sure at some point he will be, when he is cleared and when he is able to come back, you bring him back and you try again, because he can be a valuable asset to whichever roster that you want to use him on. In fact, I had just pitched only last week on one of my live streams, one of the 58 live streams I feel like I did last week leading up to WrestleMania. I had just pitched an entire comeback scenario for Samoa Joe, chasing after one of the two top titles, either the WWE title or the Universal title, neither of which he has ever held before, which is just criminal to even think about. It's criminal that he never got a chance, even briefly, to hold one of those two titles. I pitched him as a potential opponent for Walter. That was another idea that I had. But he really should have beaten Brock Lesnar for the championship at Great Balls of Fire, that one pay-per-view match they had together. It was 6 minutes long, but for those 6 minutes, it was really good. The promos were great. That promo he cut on Raw the next night after he lost, where Brock got all animated and got all up in his face, that's one of the best segments on Monday Night Raw in the last 5 years. And I know that's a low bar to set, but that was a fantastic promo. So, Roman Reigns was in the ring with them while that was going on, and he was just a background player. You could see him standing in the background. He was reacting like a fan. It was almost like, yeah, this is how you cut a promo. We had two Samoans in the ring named Joe, and one was cutting promos. The other one wishes at that time that he could cut promos the way that Samoa Joe was cutting a promo on Brock Lesnar. There was another segment on SmackDown where he was cutting promos on 5 different guys in the ring at once. That was the one where he made the double A crack about Jeff Hardy, the AA crack. If words were gold, this man would be a walking Fort Knox. And you can't find a way to use Samoa Joe? But then again, this is the same company that wouldn't even give this man the time of day for how many years? When he was in TNA? People forget about that. Joe had a choice. And he chose to sign with TNA, and I'm sure he re-signed with them a few times. So, he bears, part of the blame for this as well. But don't forget that this is a company that for years, when Samoa Joe was in TNA or when Samoa Joe became available, they did not have any interest in even looking at him. They were not looking for guys who looked the way that Samoa Joe looked. And the real sin is that it took as long as it did for him to even get to WWE in the first place. By the time he got to WWE, 2015, I think? He was already past his physical prime. He could still go. But even the Samoa Joe in 2015 was not the same Samoa Joe from 2010, 2007. Ring of Honor Joe, TNA Joe. He wasn't quite that guy anymore. But he was still Samoa Joe. When he signed with NXT, it was a special deal. Even when they did sign him, it was a special contract where he could still work outside dates on independent shows. They had no intention of bringing this man up to the main roster. And do you remember what it was that got them to change their mind and do a 180 on Samoa Joe? His merch sold well. It might have just been one t-shirt. Whatever it was, they put it up on WWE Shop and it sold out. His shirt was selling like hotcakes and that got their attention. So they never wanted him in the first place, but he could sell. He could sell merch. He could sell you with his promos. And if the injuries didn't pile up, who knows how differently things may have, turned out. But even with all of the injuries, you don't cut someone like Samoa Joe. Now, where he goes from here, he and CM Punk were tweeting at each other. And in fact, CM Punk was doing a Q&A on Twitter just the other day. And somebody asked him, would you be, I remember if it was, would you be interested or do you see yourself one day working a match against Samoa Joe? And his response was, never say never. But the two of them were tweeting little vague comments at each other. And I was thinking about this because everyone is immediately thinking of, the big companies and where he could go. If those two guys ever got together and wanted to do an independent match and not rely on WWE or AEW or any other company, if they wanted to get together to do an independent match against each other, you build this big indie card around Joe versus Punk as the main event, it would do gigantic business as indie shows go. Post-pandemic, you find a building that fits 5,000 people, 10,000 people, very much like the All In thing a few years ago. You build around that as the main event. They probably have to partner up with some different promotions. It would be very similar to an All In type of thing, but with that as the main event. I have no doubt that it would do well. But, the easy answer as far as where Samoa Joe ends up, the easy answer would be, Tony Khan. He should be on the phone to Samoa Joe the second his non-compete is up. But AEW has more than enough talent at the moment. If I were to make an exception, and of all the names that were cut this week, who's the one man or woman that I would say AEW should grab in a hot second? It's Samoa Joe. He could go back to Impact. He could go back to Ring of Honor. There might be some nostalgic value in doing that because he made his name in Ring of Honor and he had such a long run in Impact. That would be a gigantic step down. He needs a bigger audience than either of those two companies, even put together, can offer him. Now, I have no idea if he would be interested in traveling to Japan. I mean, obviously, there's any number of matches waiting for him over there. But if AEW is going to pick up just one person of these 10, there is no question about who it needs to be. The name is Samoa Joe. Mickie James was another name on that list. Mickie James, not surprising. It never felt like they really appreciated her being there. Never felt they cared to do anything with her more than they were doing, which wasn't much. I know she had tried out, I guess, on commentary. She had a tryout. I don't know if it just didn't fit what they were looking for. She'd be a great veteran presence on any roster. Maybe she links up with Nick Aldis on NWA Power or Power Surge, whatever they're calling it now. That's a possible, I think, destination for her. I don't know. That's assuming that she wants to go somewhere else and just resume her career full time. I think she could be an asset to any women's roster she ends up on. And then we have the Iconics, Peyton Royce and Billie Kay. What a great move that was, huh? Breaking up the Iconics. Made about as much sense as breaking up the Hurt Business. Or Heavy Machinery. Yeah, it's one thing to break up a team if you have better plans for them. Or you have bigger plans for one of them. When you don't have anything better for either of them, and you just break them up for the sake of breaking them up, you know what that means? You just have poor judgment. That's what that means. Vince McMahon was once said to be very high on Peyton Royce. He was high on something, but it clearly wasn't Peyton Royce. Now, I don't know if she's going to join her husband in AEW or not. Impact has a pretty solid women's division of its own. Billie Kay was done the minute they broke up the Iconics because being in a tag team was really the best thing for her. That was the best possible thing for Billie Kay, was to be part of a group, to be part of a team. From an in-ring standpoint, she is not good. I'm sorry, she is just not very good. But it was still surprising because her act, the goofy comedy that she was doing on SmackDown, it just seemed like the sort of thing WWE would love. Once they went all in on the comedy stuff with her. I mean, the comedy stuff got Santino Marella a job in that company for years. Same with R-Truth. But R-Truth is actually a really good wrestler. It's just that he's so damn entertaining, they've decided to have him do nothing but comedy. And, R-Truth is probably pushing 50 years old at this point. He's probably perfectly content to do that. Now, I know Billie Kay is well-liked. A lot of people are very upset. A lot of people. More than I would think. Very upset that Billie Kay got cut. I think to some degree, she is a victim of these pandemic shows. Because in front of an audience, she might have gotten over, pretty well. And maybe that... Now, I say maybe because, again, the comedy that she was doing on SmackDown, I didn't really find it funny. It wasn't appealing to me. Clearly, it was appealing to more people than I thought, just based on the reaction and the outcry on social media. Didn't do anything for me. So I don't know if in front of live crowds people would have really taken to it or if they would have been turned off by it. But it might have gotten over better in front of actual human beings. And maybe that would have saved her job. She did not have a good night at WrestleMania. Last weekend, that match was dreadful. That tag team turmoil match was terrible. And that is not all Billie Kay's fault, but she was part of that match. Coming off a performance like that probably did not do her any favors. I think the best thing for her would be to reunite with Payton and do something together, either on the Indies or for a company like Impact. They can't call themselves the Iconics, but they could get some mileage out of a reunion, because for her, I think that's really the only option that really makes any sense. Chelsea Green surprised me because she was all healed up from her latest injury. She had just signed a new 3-year contract extension sometime in the last few months. Yet another example of WWE offering the illusion of job security, just like that 5-year deal the Good Brothers signed before they were fired 7 months into the contract. Yeah, job security. But she could have been a real player on Raw or SmackDown, but the injuries just killed her. She broke her right wrist in her debut match on NXT, and then she broke her left wrist in her debut match on SmackDown. So the injury bug just kept biting her at the worst possible times. She's the other name after Samoa Joe I think that AEW should look at if there was going to be a second name. I see her either landing there or probably back on Impact. The return of Laurel Van Ness. I know she just did, I think, an hour-long interview on Fightful with Sean Ross Sapp. I have not seen it yet, but apparently, they spoke for an hour, so I'm sure there'll be news trickling out of that interview as far as what her plans may or may not be. That would seem the most likely destination for her. Wherever she ends up, my suggestion would be wear extra layers of athletic tape on her wrists in her debut match, just to be safe. Mojo Rawley was also cut. Mojo Rawley was basically like a statue in the corner collecting dust. He was the victim of the dreaded start and stop push. I really think they only kept him around because he was friends with Rob Gronkowski. Once Gronk decided to go back to the NFL, because he was going to get a WWE contract, if you remember. This was, I think, last summer. He made the decision to go back to the NFL, which turned out to be a good decision on his part. But I think when he made that call not to stay with WWE, I think that Mojo had outgrown his usefulness to the company. But the guy is a ball of charisma. He's definitely got an energetic, outgoing personality. It does work well on television, even though it can be obnoxious. I mean, you can utilize that as a babyface or a heel. So, I mean, he's got that going for him. In the ring, it's like I didn't see anything special, but he's got something that might make him desirable somewhere. Kalisto, Kalisto is talented. He is still part of one of the just most batshit crazy spots I've ever seen in a WWE ladder match. I think it was one of the Money in the Bank matches. He hit a Salida del Sol to one of the Usos off the top of a ladder, down through a ladder bridge down below. Still one of the fucking craziest things I've ever seen. He would fit in fine in any company. Bo Dallas, I'm surprised it took them this long to remember that he was even employed. He had not wrestled a match since late 2019. And he wasn't hurt. It wasn't like he was out with injuries. They just didn't have anything for him. I will always have a soft spot for delusional Bo Dallas as the NXT champion. And for him also mowing down El Torito on that one episode of Raw, when he used to do that celebratory, I don't know, what would you even call it? Sprint around the ring, put his arms up in the air. And El Torito just so happened to be standing there with his back turned. And the camera was in perfect position. And Bo just, just mows him down. Oh, God. That was, again, one of the greatest moments on Raw in the last 5 years. Now, what that says about Raw is not good. But I will always have a soft spot in my heart for that. Of course they could have done more with him. You can say that about half the fucking roster. He's not the only one. There are people far more talented, frankly, than Bo Dallas, who they don't know what to do, anything. They don't know what they're doing. Apparently, he's been working in real estate. He's been trying to get into a whole other venture. It seems like he already had one foot out the door anyway. I don't know that he's necessarily too broken up about this. I mean, I don't know him. I don't know. But it just seems like he was already looking at other fields outside of wrestling, outside of WWE. I'm not even sure he will sign somewhere else, or if he's just going to leave wrestling completely. That would be my question as far as Bo Dallas goes. Does he even want to wrestle? Or is he ready to just take up a whole other career? Wesley Blake was let go. Wesley Blake was let go, yet Jackson Riker continues to pollute my television screen every single week. When Steve Cutler got axed a couple of months ago over the COVID stuff, that was the end for Wesley Blake. It's very likely that Cutler would have also been on this list, probably, had he still been around. But, he was a perennial tag team guy. They broke up Blake and Murphy. They were a team in NXT, remember, with Alexa Bliss? They broke up Blake and Murphy once Murphy got called up. Then he was thrust into the Forgotten Sons of Anarchy on NXT. And then the stuff happened with the Forgotten Sons, thanks to the heat on Riker. And then Cutler recently got fired. So I feel bad for the guy. None of that was his fault. He didn't do anything wrong. But he got caught in the crossfire. And I know he and his wife are expecting their third child. So that's rough. That's rough. And then there's Tucker. Talk about getting fucked over. Thy name is Tucker Knight. He and Otis got called up to a division that badly needed some new teams. It seemed like they were getting over slowly but surely. Otis was the wild and wacky one. He's the one you figured Vince McMahon would either laugh at and like the most, or maybe he just would completely hate him. I figured Vince would probably get a kick out of him, just based on some of the people he's pushed before. But Tucker was impressive in his own right. Tucker didn't get enough credit, I think, for also being good. It wasn't like Otis was the only one worth anything on that team. Tucker was doing pretty well for himself when they would, be in matches together. And then they split them up for no reason. No good reason. And they had Tucker cost Otis his Money in the Bank contract. But because they drafted them to separate brands, they never even followed up on it and had a match. And then Tucker ended up on TV that one time in a singlet looking like one of those job guys straight out of a late 80s syndicated show. And you knew that was it for him. That was the death of Tucker. When he showed up on television looking like that, you knew the writing was on the wall in neon paint. You knew that this guy, his run was done. You done, son. You knew it at that point. Tucker's WWE career ended that day. This was just the paperwork to make it official. And again, if you don't have anything better planned, then why split them up in the first place? They split up the Iconics and they put Peyton Royce in a makeshift team with Lacey Evans. She went from one partner to another. They had Billie Kay lobbying to join the Riot Squad on SmackDown, trading one group for another. They took Otis and they put him with Chad Gable, trading one partner for another. Although it's great because at least it gets Chad Gable some time on television. Gets him out of that horrendous Shorty G gimmick. So for Gable, it was a positive. But trading partners, it's a lateral move. It's not a sign of any kind of upward mobility or some kind of big plan the company has for you. So Otis went from one partner as a babyface to another partner as a heel. That's really all that happened. So someone on Twitter asked Tucker, hey, why did they ever break up Heavy Machinery? And his response? Who fucking knows? Then the person said, oh, it really pissed them off that they did that. And Tucker said, piss me off too, dude. And when someone else chimed in and said, we're just not allowed to have nice things or have fun, apparently, it's baffling. Tucker's reply? Not with a certain old man in charge. All I can say is, I hope he has a chance to show what he can do somewhere. Do I see Tucker going on to become the next big thing in pro wrestling? No. Do I think he can go somewhere and be a perfectly serviceable part of the roster? Yes. And because I feel like this guy truly got royally screwed, I want to see him succeed somewhere. Whatever success looks like, however you measure success, maybe they put him with a new partner. But if anybody from this list deserves a chance to go somewhere and really show what they can do, this guy never even had a shot. So I hope he lands on his feet somewhere. No mention of Keith Lee, who is still out with whatever issue, medical issue, whatever it may be. Ricochet, no mention of Ricochet. Or anyone else that people have been clamoring to see leave and go somewhere else. Alistair Black was not among the names either because Alistair Black is apparently on his way back. He has filmed new vignettes for his return that should begin airing on TV very soon. I saw he posted something already on his Instagram page. It's part of what he calls his Black Arts series of videos. The last of which he posted back in January. Now, mind you, he hasn't wrestled a match since losing to Kevin Owens on Raw back in October. Then he got drafted to SmackDown. He has not been seen since. But this latest video is titled Black Arts Part 8, Chapter 0, Forgive Me, Father. And in the video, he says, Forgive me, Father, for I have sinned. It's been 4 years since my last confession. 4 years of perpetuating this lie about who I am and who I am not. But I seem to have stumbled into your woods once again, and this time I will heed the call. It is time to cull the herd. And at that point, he puts on a pair of eyeglasses, and he turns and he faces the camera. It is shameful what has happened to this man's career since being called up. This is their chance for a reset. If they keep him on SmackDown, just keep him the hell away from Seth Rollins. That's the only thing I ask. After all the stuff we had last year, and the eye stuff, and the pirate eye patch, keep him away from Seth Rollins.